Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me create more stories like this for you. The downpour was relentless, a cold, angry torrent mirroring the rage in Leo Montero's voice. "Just leave me alone. Haven't you done enough damage already?" His voice trembled as he clutched the small boy tightly to his chest. Across the soaked pavement, Javier Alejandro stood frozen, his designer suit a sodden, $1,000 rag. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the woman huddled against the brick wall, a flimsy, damp blanket barely covering her. It couldn't be her. It was impossible. "Noelle," he whispered, his own disbelief a bitter taste in his mouth. Just hours before, his meeting with international investors had been a resounding success. Champagne, flattery, millions flowing like a river. Then came the sudden storm. A delayed driver, a spontaneous decision to walk a few blocks, and now, this. She was a ghost from his past, a haunting presence returned to collect a long-forgotten debt. "Well, look at that! The great Javier Alejandro remembers me," she spat back, her voice laced with venom. "What an honor for a street beggar!" The child in her arms stirred, his eyes fluttering open. For a single, earth-shattering moment, the world stopped for Alejandro. He would recognize those eyes anywhere. They were his own, the same amber hue inherited from his paternal grandfather. Who is he?" he asked, his voice catching in his throat. Noelle instinctively pulled the boy closer, shielding him from Alejandro's piercing gaze. "No one you need to care about," she replied, but her eyes, haunted and hollow, betrayed her lie. The rain intensified, forming shattered mirror-like puddles on the slick street, reflecting the city lights in broken fragments. Alejandro stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Come on, let me take you somewhere. It's cold, and the boy could get sick." "And now you care?" she scoffed. 3 years too late, Montero. 3 years. Her eyes, once so warm and full of adoration when they looked at him, now held a glacial hatred. There was a stark contrast to the fire that had always defined her. Her black hair, once silky and lustrous, hung in wet, tangled clumps over her shoulders. And yet, Alejandro thought, she was still so stunning, devastatingly beautiful. "Please, Noelle, whatever happened between us?" "Whatever happened?" she interrupted, rising with difficulty while still holding the child. "What happened is you threw me out like a dog when your precious family convinced you I was only after your money. What happened is you signed those papers without even looking me in the face. What happened is you never answered a single one of my calls when I tried to tell you I was—" She cut herself off abruptly, biting back the words. The boy began to cry, frightened by her raised voice. "Shh, my love, it's okay," Noelle whispered, rocking him gently. "Mommy is here." Something inside Alejandro shattered at those words. Mommy is here. And him? Where had he been? "Let me help you," he insisted, pulling off his soaked jacket to cover the boy. "Just for tonight. You can leave tomorrow if you want." Noelle hesitated. The rain, the biting cold, the persistent cough Leo had endured for days. She couldn't afford the luxury of pride, not when her son's health was on the line. She remembered the cramped, disease-ridden shelters. Leo needed a warm, dry place, just for one night. One night, she finally conceded, and only because he needs it. When Noelle reached down to grab the wet blanket, her fingers brushed against Alejandro's, who had the same idea. A jolt of electricity surged through them, making them recoil as if burned. 3 years hadn't been enough to extinguish that fire. Alejandro watched as she stepped away, waiting for him to lead the way, as proud as ever, even in her despair. The boy, who couldn't have been more than 2, watched him with a curious gaze from his mother's arms. His eyes, undoubtedly identical to Alejandro's, seemed to size him up, as if trying to decipher who this stranger was. As they walked toward his luxurious Audi, a painful symbol of the chasm between their lives, Alejandro felt a mixture of desire and a burning guilt ignite within him. Something told him this encounter would change his life forever. He had to get it right this time. He couldn't let her fall again. Do you think Noelle will be able to forgive Alejandro? What would you do in her situation? Let me know in the comments. Leo, wake up! Noelle's desperate voice echoed down the hall as she gently shook the child, who was burning with a fever. Alejandro rushed into the room. The night before, he had convinced Noelle to stay in a small guest house he owned, far from the main mansion and his family's prying eyes. He never expected to find her like this, her face distorted with fear. What's wrong? He asked, rushing to the bed. He's not responding well, and he's burning up, she replied, without looking at him, her focus entirely on the boy. His temperature won't go down from 102 degrees. Leo coughed, a harsh, rattling sound that chilled Alejandro to the bone. He remembered finding them in the rain just yesterday, the child exposed to the cold for who knows how long. We have to take him to the hospital, he said, scooping the boy into his arms before Noelle could protest. Does he have any medical conditions I should know about? Noelle hesitated for a moment, but Leo's well-being came first. Bronchopulmonary dysplasia, she answered, frantically searching for her jacket. He was born premature. His lungs never fully developed. Alejandro's heart sank. That clinical information, delivered with almost detached indifference, hid a story of suffering he couldn't even begin to imagine. During the drive, Leo briefly opened his eyes and looked at Alejandro with feverish curiosity. Who are you? He asked in a weak voice. Alejandro felt a part of him break. How could he explain to a 2-year-old who he really was? I'm a friend of your mom's, he finally answered. Are you Andro? The boy asked. Mommy says that name when she sleeps. Noelle turned her gaze to the window, her cheeks flushed with a mix of shame and rage. Alejandro held his breath, but said nothing. It wasn't the time. After the hospital visit and a bronchitis diagnosis, they returned to the house with medication and instructions for absolute rest. Leo fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted. Thank you, Noelle murmured, when they were alone in the living room. For the hospital. You don't have to thank me for anything, he replied, pouring her a cup of tea. It's the least I can do. The least, she repeated bitterly. I guess now you can buy anything, can't you? Medical attention, a temporary house, even your conscience. Noelle, it's not like that. Alejandro approached her, but she instinctively stepped back. I just want to help you both. Why? Out of pity? Or out of curiosity about Leo? The tension between them was palpable. 3 years of absence and pain condensed into one small room. You can stay as long as you need, he said, avoiding the question. Leo needs to recover. His condition is not something to be taken lightly. 2 weeks, Noelle answered. Just enough time for Leo to get better. Then we'll leave. To where? Back to the streets? Anywhere away from you. The next morning brought an awkward routine. Alejandro, accustomed to waking up early for meetings, found himself in the kitchen making coffee when Noelle appeared, wrapped only in a towel, her wet hair falling over her shoulders. She clearly didn't expect to see him there. Time seemed to stop. Alejandro's eyes involuntarily traced the silhouette he had caressed so many times. The years of hardship hadn't diminished her beauty. If anything, they had made it more intense, more real. Noelle noticed his gaze and, instead of fleeing, held it with defiance, as if challenging him to come closer. Enjoying the view, Montero? She asked, her voice tight. He couldn't answer immediately. The sight of Noelle Chemal awakened memories he had tried to bury for 3 years. All-night explorations of her body, learning every inch by heart. Good morning to you too, Noelle, he managed to say, turning back to the coffee. Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes. She turned and went back to the room, leaving behind the scent of soap and a natural perfume he would recognize in a crowd of thousands. The following days established a pattern. Alejandro split his time between the office and the house, bringing toys for Leo, which the boy accepted with growing enthusiasm. Noelle watched with suspicion as her son became more and more attached to Uncle Andro, as he had decided to call him. One afternoon, while Leo was napping, Alejandro's phone rang. Seeing the name on the screen, he visibly tensed. "Mother," he answered coldly. "No, I can't attend the dinner. I have commitments. No, it doesn't concern you." "With whom?" Noelle, who was walking down the hall, stopped dead when she heard Alejandro's tone. It was the first time she had heard him speak like that to his mother, the all-powerful Victoria Montero. "I don't care what Ricardo thinks," he continued, and at the mention of that name, Noelle felt a chill. "I'm not discussing this, no, Mother, it's over." When he hung up, Alejandro met Noelle's inquisitive gaze. "Ricardo is still part of your life." It wasn't a question. "He's a partner in some companies," he answered cautiously, "but I keep my distance." Noelle nodded slowly. "Your mother never changed, did she? Still trying to control you?" "She tries," he replied with a half-smile. "But I'm not the same idiot who let himself be manipulated anymore." That night, while Leo slept, the tension finally erupted. "Stop buying him with gifts," Noelle snapped when Alejandro walked in with a new storybook. "You have no right to show up in his life like it's nothing. And you have the right to hide him from me?" he retorted, losing his temper for the first time. "Because he's mine, isn't he? Don't take me for an idiot, Noelle. He has my eyes, my smile. He even twists his mouth the way my father does when he's thinking." Noelle rushed over, furious, and pushed him with both hands. "Don't talk about what you don't know. You threw me out. You signed those damn papers to get me out of your life." Alejandro grabbed her wrists, pulling her face close to his. "Because I thought you had betrayed me. Because I was young and stupid and trusted my family more than the woman I loved." They were so close they could feel each other's breath. The rage, the desire, the pain, all mixed in a whirlwind of emotions. "The one you loved?" she whispered, her voice broken. The past tense hung in the air. For a moment, it seemed like they would kiss. Their lips sought each other, guided by a force beyond reason. But at the last second, Noelle turned her face away. "I'm going to check on Leo," she murmured, pulling free from his grip. "He has a fever again." Alejandro watched her go, his heart pounding. It was the first time he had admitted out loud what he had felt for her, what he still felt. That night, as he watched through the ajar door, seeing Noelle watch over Leo's sleep, Alejandro made a decision. He would discover the truth about what had happened 3 years ago. And if he had truly made the mistake he suspected, he would do everything to fix it. Because this time, he wouldn't let them go. "This is getting intense. What do you think will happen next? Will Alejandro find out the truth about his mother and Ricardo? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and activate the notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. And now, shall we continue with this story of love, forgiveness, and second chances? The cardiac monitor emitted a constant rhythmic beep, marking the time in the hospital room. Leo slept, connected to wires and an IV, his small chest rising and falling with difficulty. His bronchitis had escalated into pneumonia. "Bronchopulmonary dysplasia with superadded pneumonia," explained Dr. Ramirez, a pediatric pulmonologist with a kind but worried look. "It's a serious condition in children born prematurely. Their lungs didn't finish developing, and they are more vulnerable to infections." Noelle remained seated next to the bed, her eyes red from crying and exhaustion. She hadn't left the boys' side since they were admitted to the emergency room the night before, when Leo's fever reached 104 degrees and his breathing became alarmingly shallow. "You should rest a bit," Alejandro said, entering with 2 coffees. "I'll stay with him. "I'm not leaving him," she replied, but accepted the coffee with a grateful nod. Alejandro pulled up another chair and sat beside her. The silence between them, interrupted only by the beeping of the machines, felt strangely intimate. They had spent the entire night in the emergency room, watching doctors fight to stabilize Leo. In those endless hours, all the accusations had faded, replaced by a shared fear. "Do you remember that night at the beach?" Noelle suddenly asked, her gaze lost in the window. "When we snuck out of the hotel and slept under the stars?" Alejandro nodded, surprised by the unexpected memory. It had been during their trip to Cancun, far from his family's influence. 3 perfect weeks that now seemed to belong to another life. "You said you had never seen so many stars together," he murmured, "that you could touch them if you just stretched out your hand." "That night," Noelle's voice trembled. "That night we conceived Leo." Time seemed to stop. Alejandro felt the air leave his lungs. Although he had suspected it from the first moment, hearing it confirmed by her was a completely different matter. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," she replied bitterly. "I called you for weeks after you kicked me out, but you never answered." The guilt, the feeling that had been his constant companion since he saw her again, intensified to an unbearable degree. He vaguely remembered those calls, all from an unknown number he had ignored, believing it was Noelle trying to manipulate him into coming back. His mother had made sure to plant that idea in his head. "The last night," he began, his voice choked. "The last time we were together, did you already know?" Noelle shook her head. "I found out 2 weeks later when I was already on the street." Alejandro closed his eyes, reliving that last night. It had been perfect. He had kissed her as if it were the first time, exploring every inch of her skin. His always steady hands had trembled as he undressed her, and she had whispered his name, digging her nails into his back. A week later, his mother had shown him proof that Noelle was cheating on him with Ricardo, his business partner. Manipulated photos, as he would discover years later when Ricardo himself, in a drunken moment, admitted the truth. But at that moment, young and stupid, he had believed her. "I never stopped thinking about you," he confessed, looking her directly in the eyes. "Not a single day." Noelle looked at him, pain and longing mixed in her pupils. Alejandro moved his hand to her cheek, brushing it with the back of his fingers. She didn't pull away. "I hated you so much," Noelle whispered, as a tear rolled down her cheek. "But I could never tear you out of here," she added, putting a hand to her chest. Their faces drew closer, slowly, as if pulled by an invisible force. When their lips met, it was as if time had not passed at all. A kiss, salty with tears, loaded with pain and contained desire. Alejandro pulled her towards him, sitting her on his lap as he deepened the kiss. His hands moved over her waist, rising to graze the curve of her breasts over her clothes. "I want to protect you," he murmured against her lips. "You and Leo. Please, let me." Noelle responded by intensifying the kiss, tangling her fingers in his hair. For a moment, they surrendered to the desire that still burned between them, forgetting where they were, forgetting the past. But when Alejandro's hands began to slide under her blouse, Noelle pulled away abruptly, as if waking from a trance. "No," she said, standing up. "I can't do this. Not again." "Noelle, please, you don't understand what I went through," she exclaimed, immediately lowering her voice as she remembered Leo. "You have no idea what it's like to have everything ripped away from you overnight, to have the person you love look at you like a liar, like an opportunist." Alejandro approached, but she backed away. "Do you know what your mother said to me when she ordered them to throw me out?" Noelle continued, her voice breaking. "That they had investigated me, that they knew I came from a poor family, that my father had been in jail, that I was a gold digger, like all the others. And then Ricardo, your dear friend, had the nerve to offer me help if I agreed to sleep with him. Alejandro's face darkened, the missing piece of the puzzle falling into place. "Ricardo," he murmured, his rage growing inside him. "He and my mother planned everything. I swear I didn't know anything about that," he continued, approaching her again. "No? Then why did you sign the eviction order? I have a copy, Alejandro. Your signature is right there." The memory hit Alejandro like a punch. That day, enraged by the supposed evidence of her betrayal, he had signed several documents that his mother had given him without reading them. "Company matters that need your urgent attention," she had said. "I signed a lot of papers that day," he admitted with shame. "I was blinded by jealousy, by rage. My mother showed me some photos. They showed you with Ricardo." "Ricardo?" Noelle let out a bitter laugh. "The man who constantly harassed me and whom I rejected so many times? Your mother's intimate friend?" The revelation fell like a ton of bricks on Alejandro. All the pieces were beginning to fit. His mother, obsessed with him marrying someone of his class. Ricardo, always willing to please her, interested in getting rid of Noelle to have a clear path to Montero's companies through Alejandro. "I'm going to tell you the truth," Noelle said, sitting down again. "The whole truth. And then you can decide if you want to be a part of our lives." She began to speak, revealing details that Alejandro had never known. How Ricardo had harassed her from the beginning. How Victoria Montero had tried to bribe her to leave her son. How, when nothing worked, they had planned to destroy their relationship. The monitor beeped suddenly. The boy was stirring in his sleep, his breathing more labored than before. A doctor and 2 nurses rushed into the room. "You have to leave," one of the nurses ordered, as the doctor examined the boy. In the hallway, Alejandro held Noelle as her legs buckled. He held her against his chest as she trembled with fear. And in that embrace, in the midst of shared terror, they both felt something being rebuilt between them. A silent promise. This time, they would face whatever came together. This is where things get serious. Do you think Alejandro will be able to prove his innocence and win Noelle's trust back? What do you think will happen to Leo? Let me know your predictions in the comments below. Thank you for your support. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe for more chapters. The hospital waiting room had become their personal purgatory. 3 hours had passed since the doctors stabilized Leo, but Alejandro hadn't been able to talk to Noelle. She had locked herself in the room with the boy, refusing to leave him alone for a second. Unable to sit still, Alejandro made a decision. He dialed a number on his phone. "Carlos, I need you to investigate something immediately," he ordered. "The dismissal of Noelle Vidal from the Montero mansion 3 years ago. I want to know who gave the order, what documents were signed, and especially, I need to talk to whoever made me sign those papers." The response on the other end was brief. "I'll be in your office in an hour, sir." 2 hours later, Alejandro stared at Eduardo Figueroa, the mansion's retired head of staff. The man, visibly uncomfortable, avoided his gaze. "Your mother insisted it was a matter of security, Mr. Montero," the man explained, nervously toying with a folder. "She said that Miss Vidal had been investigated and was a danger to the family. And I signed her expulsion without reading it?" Alejandro slammed his fist on the desk. "How could you let that happen, Eduardo?" The man swallowed. "You were agitated that day. You signed several documents without looking at them. When Miss Vidal tried to speak with you, your mother had already given instructions not to let her in under any circumstances. And no one thought to question her." The rage burned within him. "No one thought that maybe my mother was manipulating me." Eduardo lowered his gaze. "Your mother threatened to fire anyone who interfered. Miss Vidal left without a fuss when she was shown the document with your signature. She only asked to speak with you one last time, but your mother had already made sure you were out of town." Alejandro ran his hands over his face, unable to contain his frustration. "Why are you coming back with this now? Eduardo asked curiously. It's been 3 years. Because I found her, he replied, and his voice broke as he added, her and my son. Eduardo's face went pale. Your son, he murmured. My God, we didn't know. Mrs. Victoria told us that Miss Vidal just wanted to trap you with a fake pregnancy. Alejandro felt his blood boil. My mother knew Noelle was pregnant, he said more to himself than to Eduardo. That's why she rushed to get her out of my life. I'm so sorry, sir, Eduardo murmured, ashamed. Many of us suspected something wasn't right, but no one dared to question her. And that man, Ricardo Mendez, always hanging around, always talking to your mother in private. Ricardo, Alejandro spat. I need to talk to him too. Eduardo shifted uncomfortably. Be careful, sir. Mr. Mendez has influence on the Montero Corp board of directors. He's been persuading several members to question your leadership. Alejandro smiled humorlessly. Let him try. We'll see who falls first. Back at the hospital, Alejandro felt every piece of the puzzle click into place. His mother, obsessed with the family's good name. Ricardo, always ready to please her, with his eyes on control of the Montero companies. The manipulated photos, everything to separate him from the only woman he had truly loved. When he entered the room, he found Noelle dozing in the chair next to Leo's bed. The boy was breathing more easily, and color had returned to his cheeks. Alejandro crept closer and placed a soft kiss on the boy's forehead. He's just like you when you sleep, Noelle whispered, startling him. I thought you were asleep, he replied. Just resting my eyes, she smiled weakly. The doctors say he's responding well to the treatment. They've reduced his oxygen dose. Alejandro nodded, sitting down in front of her. Noelle's face showed signs of exhaustion, but also a strength he had always admired in her. We need to talk, Noelle, Alejandro finally said. She sighed as if she had been dreading this moment. I know, but not here, she said, nodding at Leo. In the hallway, once outside, Alejandro spoke first. I went to see Eduardo, the former head of staff. Noelle tensed visibly. Why? Because I needed to know the truth, he replied, moving closer to her. I needed to confirm what I already suspected, that I was an idiot manipulated by my mother and Ricardo. Noelle's eyes filled with tears. Eduardo knew everything, he continued. He knew my mother kicked you out, that Ricardo was involved. He even knew you tried to talk to me about your pregnancy. Noelle hugged herself, as if protecting herself from painful memories. And now what? You think you can show up after 3 years and fix everything with an apology? No, he said, his voice firm but soft. I know it will take me a lifetime to repair what I did. But for Leo, for you, I'm willing to try every day for the rest of my life. And what about Ricardo? She asked. And your mother? Do you think they'll leave us alone? Alejandro took her hands in his. I'm going to confront them, both of them, and this time, I won't be deceived. Noelle pushed him with both hands, the accumulated rage of 3 years erupting like a volcano. You have no idea. You don't know what it's like to sleep in shelters, to have to beg to feed your son. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. While you went on with your perfect life, Alejandro grabbed her wrists when she tried to push him again. My life has been a hell without you, he exclaimed, pulling her towards him. Every damn day I've thought about you. I've dreamed about you. I've hated myself for leaving you. Let me go, she demanded, but her voice lacked conviction. Their faces were so close they could feel each other's breath. The tension between them, that electricity that had always existed, crackled like a high-voltage wire. Never again, he whispered just before he kissed her. It was a kiss born of desperation, of shared pain, but also of a desire that had never died. Noelle fought against it for only a moment before giving in, responding with the same intensity, biting his lower lip almost in a frenzy. Alejandro pushed her against the wall, lifting her effortlessly. She wrapped her legs around his waist, tangling her fingers in his hair, pulling on him fiercely. There was no tenderness in that encounter, only unleashed passion after years of absence. "I hate you," she murmured between kisses. "I hate you so much." "I know," he replied, kissing her neck, sliding his hands under her blouse. "I know." In a flash of lucidity, Alejandro remembered where they were. He picked her up in his arms and, without stopping the kiss, carried her to a small family lounge at the end of the hall. He closed the door with his foot and laid her on the sofa. Their clothes began to fall away. Noel unbuttoned his shirt with impatient fingers, scratching his chest, marking him as hers. He slid his hands up her thighs, lifting her skirt, rediscovering every curve of her body. "Noel," he moaned against her skin. "I've missed you so much." There were no more words, just the sound of their ragged breaths, of skin against skin, of promises whispered between muffled moans. Hours later, when the first rays of sun filtered through the window, they remained tangled on the sofa, covered only by his jacket. "What are we going to do now?" Noel asked, her head resting on his chest. Alejandro stroked her bare back with gentle fingers. "What we should have done 3 years ago," he replied. "Be together, raise our son, face anyone who tries to separate us." Noel propped herself up on an elbow to look him in the eye. "It won't be easy." "Your mother?" "My mother will have to accept it or lose me forever," he interrupted. "And Ricardo, he'll regret messing with us." Noel bit her lower lip, hesitating. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Alejandro took her face in his hands, wiping a tear with his thumb. "Then let me prove it to you every day," he whispered. "Let me earn your trust again." She didn't answer with words. Instead, she kissed him softly. A kiss different from the passionate ones from hours before, a kiss that tasted of a new beginning. The sound of his phone interrupted them. It was Leo's doctor. "Your son is awake and asking for you," the voice on the other end of the line informed him. Alejandro looked at Noel with a silent question in his eyes. She nodded, intertwining her fingers with his. "Let's go together," she said. And for the first time in 3 years, she smiled without reservations. Wow, what a roller coaster of emotions. What do you think will happen to Ricardo and Victoria? Will Alejandro and Noel finally have their happy ending? Leave your comments below. This is just the beginning. If you loved this chapter, hit that like button and subscribe for more. The spring sun illuminated the garden of the small house on the outskirts of the city. 3 months had passed since those agonizing days in the hospital. Leo was playing among the flowers, chasing a butterfly with his crystalline laughter filling the air. His recovery had been slow but steady, and although he still went to respiratory therapy and medical checkups regularly, the worst was behind them. Noel watched him from the terrace, a cup of coffee in her hands, and a serene smile on her face. Her life had changed so much in so little time that sometimes she feared waking up and finding herself back on the streets, fighting to survive. "What are you thinking about?" Alejandro asked, appearing behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "About how lucky we are," she replied, leaning against his chest. "How life can change when you least expect it." Alejandro kissed her neck softly, sending shivers down her spine. "I will never stop thanking fate for bringing you back into my life," he murmured against her skin. After 2 weeks in the hospital, they had been discharged with a strict care and medication regimen. Alejandro had fitted out this house for them, away from the family mansion and his mother's toxic influence. He had hired the best pediatric pulmonologists, and thanks to an intensive and personalized treatment, Leo was getting better every day. The confrontation with Victoria Montero had been inevitable and explosive. When Alejandro told her that Noel and Leo would live with him, that he would publicly acknowledge his son, and that he would not tolerate any more manipulation, the woman had gone into a rage. "I'm warning you, Alejandro," his mother had threatened. "If you insist on being with that woman, forget about your inheritance. I will not allow that gold digger and her bastard to carry the Montero name." "You can keep all the money, Mother," he had replied with a calmness that surprised everyone. "I already have the only thing that truly matters to me. And as for Leo, not only will he carry my last name, but he will be the legitimate heir to everything I have built myself." Victoria had paled at her son's determination, seeing the control she had exerted for years vanish. "Ricardo will destroy you," she had replied in one last attempt at manipulation. "He already has the board of directors practically in his pocket." "Let him try," Alejandro had smiled. "He'll be too busy defending himself from the fraud and manipulation charges I'm preparing against him." And indeed, Ricardo Mendez had fallen like a house of cards just a week later, when the evidence of his embezzlement and manipulation of business documents came to light. It had been Eduardo Figueroa, remorseful for his silence over the years, who had provided the key information to bring down the corrupt partner. That day, upon returning home, Noelle had greeted him with a mixture of concern and admiration. "Are you sure about what you did?" she had asked. "Your mother could leave you with nothing." Alejandro had simply smiled, kissing her tenderly. "I have more money than we could spend in several lifetimes, Noelle. Investments, properties, companies that I have built on my own. I don't need my mother's fortune or her approval." The days had turned into weeks, the weeks into months. Little by little, they had built a routine, learning to be a family. Leo, with the adaptability of children, had accepted Alejandro with a surprising naturalness. At first, there were questions. "Why didn't you ever come before?" Or, "Why was Mommy sad when she talked about you?" Questions that they had answered with simplified truths, appropriate for his age. In time, Leo had begun to call him Dad, first timidly, then with a naturalness that melted Alejandro's heart every time. Noelle had gotten a job at a local clinic, using her training as a nurse that she had never been able to fully practice. She had discovered that her personal experience with Leo's illness made her a particularly empathetic professional with parents of children with chronic illnesses. Alejandro managed his business from home most of the time, prioritizing being present for Leo and her. After the conflict with his mother and Ricardo, he had restructured his companies, moving away from Montero Corp. And strengthening his own projects. Not everything had been perfect. Noelle's nightmares about the difficult times persisted. Sometimes, Alejandro would wake her up when he heard her crying in her sleep, and he would hug her until she fell back asleep. Other times, their insecurities would cause arguments that ended with passionate reconciliations. "Dad, look what I found." Leo's voice brought him out of his thoughts. The boy was running towards them with something in his hands. Alejandro knelt down to his height, marveling every day at the miracle that was his son. The same eyes, the same smile, gestures he recognized as his own. It was like seeing himself as a child, but with the vitality and sweetness he had inherited from Noelle. "What do you have there, champ?" he asked with curiosity. Leo opened his hands, revealing a small green frog. "Can we keep it?" he pleaded with those eyes to which Alejandro found it impossible to deny. "Anything. I'll put air in its box so it can breathe well, like me." That innocent reference to his illness moved both parents. Leo had learned to live with his limitations, integrating them into his life with amazing naturalness. Noelle laughed, shaking her head. "I think it will be happier here in the garden, sweetie," she explained gently. "This is its home, just like this house is ours." The boy seemed to consider the answer seriously. "And will we always live here?" he asked, looking back and forth at his parents. "Will we never go back to the street?" The innocent but fear-laden question made Noelle's heart ache. Alejandro intervened, taking the boy in his arms. "Never again, Leo," he promised firmly. "This is our home now. We will always be together." Leo smiled, seemingly satisfied with the answer, and asked to be put down to return the frog to the garden. When he ran off, Noelle turned to Alejandro, emotion shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, caressing his cheek, "for giving us this, for keeping your promise." Alejandro pulled her towards him, kissing her forehead. "I've been thinking," he began with some hesitation. "Maybe it's time to make this official." Noelle looked at him intrigued. "What do you mean?" Alejandro took a deep breath and led her to the garden, where Leo was still playing. Taking her by the waist, he kissed her gently on the lips, before tilting his head to whisper in her ear, "I want to start over, but with you in my bed, at my table, in my life. For real. Forever." Noelle's heart raced as she understood his words. Her eyes filled with tears, while a smile spread across her face. "You're asking me what I think you're asking me," she said. Alejandro nodded, pulling a small box from his pants pocket. "I've been carrying it with me for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment," he confessed, "and I've realized that any moment with you is perfect." Before he could open the box, Leo came running and stopped in front of them, watching them with curiosity. "Why are you crying, Mommy?" he asked worriedly. "Because I'm very happy, my love," she replied, bending down to hug him. Leo looked at the box in his father's hands, and then at his mother, a look of understanding lighting up his childish face. "Dad, Mommy turned red," he exclaimed with a mischievous laugh. Alejandro laughed too, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. "It's because I'm asking her if she wants to marry me," he explained simply, "so we can be an official family." Leo's eyes widened. "So we'll be a real family?" he asked innocently. "Like my friends who have a mom and dad in the same house?" "We're already a real family, sweetie," Noelle replied, looking at Alejandro with love. "But yes, if your dad insists so much, I guess we can make it official." Alejandro's smile lit up his face as he opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant gold ring with a small diamond. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his heart beating fast. Noelle extended her hand for him to slide the ring onto her finger. "It's a yes," she confirmed, before kissing him softly. Leo clapped excitedly, jumping around them. Alejandro lifted him with one arm, while with the other he hugged Noelle, like the family they were always meant to be. That night, after putting Leo to bed, who had insisted that they both read him a story, Alejandro found Noelle on the terrace, watching the stars. He approached silently and hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Remember that night at the beach?" he asked. "You said you could touch the stars." Noelle smiled, leaning back against him. "Now I can touch them again," she replied, lifting her hand where the ring shone. "Because I have everything I ever dreamed of." Alejandro turned her in his arms to look her in the eyes. In them, he saw everything they had overcome. The pain, the separation, the reunion, the reconciliation, and now, the promise of a future, together. In the distance, they heard Leo's soft cough, a reminder that their son would always require special care. But they would no longer face those challenges alone. "This time I won't let you fall," he promised, sealing his vow with a kiss under the starry spring sky. "Neither will you, my love." Noelle responded to his kiss with all the passion and love she had kept for 3 years of loneliness. The past was behind them, and the future, as bright as the stars above them, was just beginning. What a beautiful ending. I hope you enjoyed this rewritten story. What part did you like the most? Share your thoughts below.